Hello, and welcome to Career STEM Chats. In this episode, you'll be hearing a chat between Sarah Cardozo, a STEM career expert, and Tamar Aprahamian. Aprahamian is the founder of JetPub Scientific Communications, where she helps scientists and organizations tell their stories clearly. Her work sits at the intersection of science and storytelling, supporting clients across the life sciences industry and in academia. Tamar's path started in research. She trained as a biologist, earning her PhD in cell, molecular, and developmental biology from the Tufts University Graduate School of Biomedical Sciences. From there, she moved through both academia and the fast-paced world of biotech startups, gaining a first-hand understanding of how science moves, from the lab bench to real-world impact. Along the way, she published 38 peer-reviewed papers and became a reviewer for grant panels and scientific journals. That experience gave her a deep familiarity not just with doing science, but how it's evaluated, funded, and shared. But what really defines Tamar's work is translation, taking complex, often highly technical research and shaping it into something clear and compelling. Through JetPub, she's helping bridge that gap every day, making science more accessible and ultimately more impactful.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Tamar. It really is a pleasure to have you. And one of the reasons why I was so interested in interviewing you is you kind of went the other direction and you became an entrepreneur. And I think that that's so exciting. And so if we could talk about the journey to get you there, and then we can talk about JetPub and what it does and why and so on and so forth, and what needs you're filling. I would imagine that would be what you were doing. So my first question is always, when did you know you wanted to be a scientist? How old were you?
I was in high school. Thank you for having me, Sarah. This is exciting to be part of. And it was definitely from high school. I had a biology and anatomy teacher named Mrs. Linda Muller. I've reached out to her since then, like through my career, because I realized that her classes were so exciting to me and fun. And I knew that I really loved the sciences then, and I had chemistry and physics in between that. But going into college, I knew that science was the way I was planning to go.
And so your undergraduate degree was
In biology, and like many biology majors, I was pre-med, planned to go to med school, and I thought I would be a surgeon. That was kind of my plan. I like seeing how things work, and as any aspiring med student would be, I got into lab work just to put it on my CV because I thought that was the important thing to do at the time. And I had the opportunity to work off campus in a lab, and just get a really easy sense of things, few hours a week between my sophomore and junior year. And then in the summer between junior and senior year, I did a longer internship, more full time, really got into, the inner workings of the lab and setting up broth for bacteria, growing plasmids and isolating them, and then getting into the preclinical work, which I was really interested in because for me it was more exciting to see what was going on, even though running gels and it's all very important and it was a big part of my journey, but I was really interested in the preclinical animal models. And so after the summer, I had the opportunity to work part-time in the lab throughout my senior year in college. And then I stayed on for 3 years after that. I had another high school teacher who had said before, not to go directly from college to grad school. And, that rings true for some people and for others it doesn't. But for me, I was really excited about the work I was doing. And I was able to get an independent research project as a technician that I developed and took into grad school. for my PhD in cell and molecular
Wow.
biology. Yeah, and it
And
was
they let you take that technology with you. That's unusual.
that it was an interesting situation, and it was developing. I was in a cardiovascular lab, and the project was moving into autoimmune disease. It was looking at the interactions between atherosclerosis and lupus, actually, and for me, it was just exciting, and that was really the start of going in so many different directions, which is what I have done, throughout my career, collaborating with people on different projects to see where you can take the science. And even now, I definitely take that with me, jumping into all different projects with clients and companies working in many different fields.
And so I'm going to keep it a little bit more chronological.
Yeah, sure.
So, following your undergraduate, clearly you loved the research you were doing because it just comes out you tomorrow, right? With such joy, right? You're just a joyful scientist to me. That's what you are. You're just in love with the work that you do, as most scientists are, actually.
Mhm. It was surprising to me, honestly. I thought that a lab would be very, closed off and not very social. And, I enjoy meeting people, and I found it to be, I was in a lab and a lab floor that were predominantly postdocs and fellows. And, it was very collaborative, and everyone was from another, part of the world. And it was just really exciting from the get-go. And I kind of jumped onto their hard work ethic, staying at night, so I would be working on my projects just because everyone was doing it, and it was exciting. So definitely loved it from early on. Absolutely.
I love it. And then following your PhD, and
I
you had a bit of a change from biology, yeah?
So I was doing, I carried through in the cardiovascular space, and my postdoc was more in immunology, and I
Oh,
applied and received a K award, an independent scientist development grant, and I was part of the renal department because of the nature of the lupus part of aspect of the project I was working on. And so that was really eye-opening as well. Jumping into, working with immunologists was just, it still always is amazing, because there are so many different cell types being understood and developed, identified all the time, it seemed like. And so that became somewhat of my independent research program.
project.
Yeah. And I started, thinking, I was always thinking one step ahead. When I got to grad school, I said, okay, what do I have to do to get out of here? Not that that was the goal, but how do I get a committee,
I think
And then
that's
when
great. I think
right?
that's a great goal.
Yeah, and like, just what do I need to do? What are the next steps? How do I progress? And thinking I would go up the academic career ladder as for my life. That was the thought at the time. And so when I had my lab and the grant, I said, how do I get students or volunteers? So I had, undergraduates from mostly BC, some from BU, that would come and work in the lab and volunteer and help advance the science. And I got to do some mentoring through that. Um, and I also had a sponsored research program with a company, and that allowed me to hire a postdoc and a technician. And so, I had some grants along the way that, I was able to progress towards faculty, um, and
Faculty track. Let's
yes,
say
yes,
faculty track.
exactly.
Wow, you fell off the track.
I did.
That must be an interesting story.
It was very unexpected. It was just a side project. So having been one of the only, native English speakers in the lab, or throughout my career as a technician and in grad school, um, most of my friends would say, "Hey, can you read this for me?" And before I submit it to the journal. And so I was doing this editing, and one night in 2015 in July, I was, my husband and I were hosting a dinner. He's not a scientist. There were several scientists plus myself. He's the entrepreneur. And we were talking about communication and medical writing, and the other scientists were getting into industry out of academia. And I was still in academia heavily at the time, trying to get large grants for my own to support myself and my lab. Um, and so, and he said, well, you guys maybe you should start your own company. And it just, the next morning I woke up and my 6-month-old daughter was sleeping. It was very early. It was quiet on a Sunday. And I looked up, companies, and I said, oh, wow, there really is a market for this. And it just seemed exciting at the time. So it started as a passion project that we would, work on editing scientific papers. And so I put the word out there. I did a little bit of networking, told some friends, had my first corporate client come on board, and I have been learning ever since. So
Wow.
I got out of not just my first client was more in the marketing space of science writing.
But you also had a job in between, yeah?
I did. So
Before,
all along, so I started this while I was an assistant professor at BU running a lab.
oh, so Pet
Yes.
Jet Pub was
It was
your
a side
side project.
project. Yes.
Ah, got
And
it.
it started growing organically. And then I had the opportunity to join a startup as doing preclinical development. And so it was very small. The scientific team was amazing. I learned a lot. So I left academia, went into industry. It was about a year and a half or so. And JetPub was growing organically. It's to the point where it was too much, to do everything at once. I had a small child too, and the startup was, really gangbusters, and it was exciting. I learned so much. Um, and I was laid off in March of 2018. And that was the moment where we decided to see how JetPub would go on its own, as my only project. Because before I was, in academia, I was trying to find a job in case my grants ran out. I was running a small company. It, being part of a wife and a mother,
And a mom, and a mom.
there was a
I do
lot.
have one question for you, though.
Mhm.
When you were writing grants or
Mhm.
editing um, people's papers for submission, I would imagine,
Mhm.
how successful were you at gaining those grants?
For myself, I mean, I had enough to support myself throughout my whole career. Of course, I had guidance, and I took advantage of some of the programs at BU where they were grant writing development courses, informal faculty um, classes that we seminars and things like that. And so I tried the most I could to get it. I had a really nice score on one of my grants, and the resubmission went in, and of course it was something else. And it was at the time when I know funding is not great now. When I was starting as a technician, funding, I remember being near like 18% or something. And it was below 10 when I was, coming of age to submit my R01s. So but I did get smaller grants, pilot project grants. My student even got a fellowship grant and
And I
other
know
things.
and I know why. Right now, the whole thing makes sense to me, and that's why I asked you that question,
Hmm.
because you're very unique. You have scientific knowledge beyond, like nobody can say you aren't trained. You're completely trained up, right? You had
Yes.
a run at a academic track. You've had industry, and now in your own company,
Hmm.
and all of it has seemed to, like, as you're speaking to me, communication just keeps coming up and up and up, like it's the theme throughout your career.
Yes.
So I'm not surprised that this is the this is sort of, the beginning or maybe the end of, or the forever of your journey. I don't know. I'm
I
not, we'll see.
We'll see. We'll see. I can't imagine doing anything else now at this point. I truly enjoy it.
You love your work.
I do.
It shows, but I
Yeah.
think you're one of those rare people that have enjoyed everything that you've done.
I have. I mean, of course,
Yeah.
there have been difficult moments of it, but
No, you were in
you know,
academia. Let's be clear. It's not an easy place to reside.
no, but it's I love a challenge, and so I've learned to take every challenge I've been faced with, and as maybe hokey as it sounds, and use it towards everything that has brought me to where I am, because I wouldn't have the experience or the network or the support of even old colleagues and friends that I still keep in touch with that are, just interesting scientifically, personally. Those are the things I enjoy for the most. Yeah.
I love that. It just shines through. And so tell us, because I think it's kind of interesting, because certainly the next generation, right, are very entrepreneurial.
Hmm.
Millennials, Gen Zs, they always have a side hustle going on. You were, you were a little bit ahead. And so if you could talk about the development of JetPub, I think that would be also interesting, because one can have lots of ideas, and I know you took it as sort of consulting and little projects here and there,
Hmm.
but once you scaled up, what was that like? Did you hire people? Did you not hire people? Do you go out and do the sales? Do you have somebody that kind of, like, what structure did you develop and what kind of culture?
So the structure has been, I've been the driving force with all of it. I've had the advantage of my husband who has an MBA in entrepreneurship to kind of guide me along the major points of growth and business. I've loved all of that, meeting people, reaching out to new clients, learning about their new projects and the different types of writing. So I had always started with I had started out with contractors from the beginning. And so they were just friends and colleagues and younger go-getters that, wanted a side hustle. And so that's how we started out. And we're still in that growth phase of having contractors and looking towards the next phase of having full-time employees. But I grew the team, and I think it kind of just happened organically as we were growing. So I've never said no to a project. And I always would just find a way to make that happen. So I've always had a pool of people. And over the years now, friends will reach out and say, hey, so and so is interested in medical writing, and would you like to work with them? And if it's the right fit, then I'm happy to have them try out some writing projects, be able to put it on their resume, and then, many have gone on to either writing jobs or other jobs in industry after a short or a longer time, or, if they've stayed on the team. And so it's just grown as the business has grown, as the workload has grown. Um, and it's been really interesting. So I do right now, I do a lot of everything still passes through me. This is another part of the growth phase coming. But and I don't have a lot of time to sit down and write a draft of a paper, even though sometimes I have to stop myself from doing once I'm doing the first assessment of a project before I pass it on to the team, because it's very fun. But there are a lot of other things to running a business that need to get done as well. So,
And so, absolutely. And I think that the word came into my head, which happens to me often when I'm speaking to people. So you said something before you were talking about some of the work you did earlier on.
mhm.
And I thought in my head, oh, Tamar never says no. She always says yes. She always jumps into the deep end of the pool
Mhm.
and figure it out.
That's exactly right.
Because you
You
know how to
figure it out.
swim. You know how to swim and you figure it out.
Exactly. If
Yeah.
you're resourceful, that when people ask, what kind of p attributes do you look for in a part of your team or a writer? And I say, look, if you're motivated and excited, that's great. And also if you're resourceful, because clients have said, have you worked on, at the time, a clinical protocol before? And I said, no, but I'm happy to try. And, there are prior examples, their own work, other protocols they've published before, for example, and then the guidelines from the FDA and all things that you can find online and just learn from. The same for grants, for submitting an SBIR. We do a lot of the content, but we also do the and maybe this is getting ahead, but we also do the project management, all of the different components of the application that have to go in. We will, make sure we have everything. We can prepare all those documents and then we do the submission. So when you're in academia, you take all of the components of a grant, you give it to your grants administrator, and they do the submission. The first time I submitted an SBIR, it was a completely unknown, amazing experience. I mean, the helplines were great. I had a friend, a really more established friend from when I was a technician, who had helped me doing some consulting and walk me through the process because he had submitted 7 or 8 and had, received a lot of those grants too, the SBIRs. So it's always a learning process. Reaching out to people. That was one thing I learned early on too, was that if you don't know something or your PI doesn't know something, the one thing he told me, my advisor at the time said, this person's an expert on this. Go talk to them, like, and facilitated the collaboration that way. And that's what I've taken forward with me through my whole career and everything I've done. Like it's not worth reinventing the wheel, so to speak, right? And you just reach out to somebody who either has the expertise or can guide you to somebody who does, if you can't find it on your own.
If
Um,
you can't find it on your own, right?
mm,
And I think that people, particularly in the scientific community, are very happy and willing to share. It's a
mhm.
very collaborative environment. It really is. Probably one of the most collaborative environments I think I've ever been in, and I've been in most throughout my career. I've been in a lot. Um, and then the other piece to it is, how do you bring, so you do SBIR grants. I have a
Mhm,
friend actually who had a whole company. She was a PhD, postdoc, brilliant,
mhm,
ended up with a company that helped people write SBIR grants.
mhm. It's a big market. I was
And
honestly,
I'm going to connect you with her because she's
okay,
wonderful.
that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Um, how do you attract business? And I guess also in a down market, which we're in.
Mhm.
So how do you bring business in?
So from the beginning, it started just from a few, or not a few, a lot of networking, reaching out to people when I was really diving in full time in 2018. And, a few of those people would get back to me, and like any kind of sales or marketing attempts, I got one project, and then, if the clients had more to do, we would take on more projects as they needed. Some companies have more limited budgets than others. Um, so they come for one specific project, but it's all been really networking and referrals. Now that I've been doing it so long, a lot of people have moved jobs. And so we've worked with them at one company and then we'll be able to work with them at another
Um,
company while maintaining our work with, their former company.
so
Um,
you really you're building relationships.
It's a lot of relationship building, and I enjoy it. This is a really exciting part of meeting people and then also staying connected with people and becoming friends with people too as well, and being able to connect other people with them as it's as relevant, for any kind of career sort of issue or connection.
Because they're of course, because and um, especially in this environment, which is somewhat difficult.
Right. It's been a little slow this year, but I think it's more that the some companies are tightening back or laying people off, and so taking more things in-house where they would really like us to help them, because they don't have the time to do it, but they're forced to. But we've still had new clients come on board this year, and
Right.
it's even given the climate, so we're busy.
And so if you look at the swath, right, of work that JetPub does, right?
Mhm.
Madam CEO, love that. Um, what is that? Sort of, you said project management and, the writing, but are there, areas of writing, different areas, different subjects,
There
you know,
certainly are, from everything from marketing on one end of the spectrum, which includes app notes, tech notes, blogs, even through publications and grants, posters, abstracts, presentations of any kind. And that includes all the submissions. We also interact with the PIs or the authors on all of the papers if the clients would like, and we get the approvals, get the revisions, and collate all of that. And then on the other end of the spectrum is the clinical and regulatory documentation, all the clinical protocols and study reports, FDA responses, literature searches, post-market. And so if getting towards what area of science it is, we're really agnostic to that. There's no particular field. People say like, you must have a lot of cardiovascular or autoimmune clients. And I really don't. I mean, we have a few, but I haven't been able to pursue that, even though it's my, bread and butter sort of extensive knowledge base. I really get excited when it is something that I've, worked on a long time ago. But I just love everything that we've jumped into. And it's been across any field, any indication, from instrumentation for R&D through diagnostics, therapeutics, and devices. And so we really have covered a lot. AI, developing drug development. It's really run the gamut,
that's exciting.
and something we like, right? And so it's something in terms of the culture, I think is I wanted it to be amazing for work-life balance, for my team. Um, we get it done. We have time when we can, do what we need to at home. Sometimes we're working late at night, sometimes very early in the morning, sometimes on a weekend, or late on a Friday to get a grant deadline in. And other times we can, you know, go out for a run when we need to, go to the gym, go to a doctor's appointment, take our kids where we need to, that type of thing. So it's all part of the mindset, I think, of like the excitement of working on a lot of different projects. I knew I wasn't going to study the same molecule for 30 years, and there's nothing wrong with that. I've always admired the professors I had that did that and stayed in academia. Um, I've always been jumping into different fields and learning something new. So for me, it works. And for my team, it works as well. And some people are just, would prefer to focus on either one type of writing, one area, of an indication. Um, so that's how we are. So it's
Well,
runs the gamut.
it runs the gamut, which is fabulous because so did you in your career. And the reason you can be, to all people is because the training that you had, faculty track, like understanding how that ecosystem works, moving into biotech, understanding how industry writes differently right, than
Mhm.
academia does, like drastically
Yes.
academia does, right?
Mhm.
And you've done it all. And you've mentored and you've brought people up along the way. It's such just a great story. So I guess one of my last questions, and you'll have the last thoughts. But one of my last questions, if somebody were interested, and there's a lot of people who are looking at scientific writing as for many reasons. One, they love the language. Two, they love the science, and they're fabulous communicators,
Mhm.
such as yourself. What would you say? Somebody who's in the lab, that says, I never want to be on a bench again in my life. And I'm really good at writing. About every grant I've written, I've gained, I understand, I've written protocols, whatever. What
Mhm.
would you suggest to the early career to mid-career scientist if they were looking at a science writing job?
So the first thing I always ask is if there's a particular type of writing they're interested in or learning about the different types, because I had not
Let's
seen
say you're
clinical.
not in the picture.
Mhm.
Let's say you're not in the picture.
Right. No, in general.
No, but what I'm saying, maybe the question wasn't worded correctly. What I'm trying to say is, if somebody were starting out,
Hmm.
what advice would you give to them? How would they get their first contract? How would they get their first job? What would they have to have?
So many people don't start out as or wanting to do medical writing, right? Some people do, and I have people on my team or that have come through the team that came straight out of school and said, "I don't want to be on a bench. I want to write. It's exactly what I want to do." And I think what I was starting to go down the path of is there are different types of medical writing, which I didn't really know at the time either. And so there are it's kind of an exploration of the type of writing that you'd like to do. You know, clinical writing is more technical. Publications are more in the wheelhouse of an academic scientist, so they feel more comfortable. And then marketing is another type. And so getting some knowing that and either getting experience in that field if possible. It's hard to break in
It is.
at the beginning for a medical writer. And I've worked with a lot of people who have, faced this and said, how do I get a job? And eventually they do. And my advice is always if they're not willing to take a chance on you, then maybe, it's not the right fit for you as a company. If a company is requiring 8 years of experience, or even as an entry level, like some certain certifications, which there are. I have jumped in, and all of my team has sort of jumped in and learned. So I don't have specific advice on.
Would you then,
Yeah.
because I'm just following your career path in my head, I don't,
Yeah.
and would you recommend then, if that's what somebody would really want to do, to go to an industry, even a bench job in
Mhm.
a biotech or pharma for a couple of years, and then maybe they can move within, might be easier to move within.
That is definitely an alternative, one path to go down for sure. If there's a way to get exposure to writing as a freelancer or as a side job. I have known people in academia that have just started editing papers for other people in their lab or outside the lab, and they've just put themselves out there in the community to offer a service either as a volunteer, just to get the experience. That's one way. Working with a company like mine or other small companies that they do have not fellowship, like kind of fellowships or training programs at certain maybe larger companies for medical writing in different areas, different types of writing. So those are some options. Um,
So would you think then that maybe more mid-career is a better transition point?
Not necessarily.
Maybe out of your PhD, 10, maybe 10 years or so?
I don't think that that's necessarily the
No, not
case because
necessarily.
I've had, several on my team that have come straight out of a PhD and were just enthusiastic and phenomenal writers and took on any project, and maybe gravitated towards one type of writing than another. But the way we've structured it is I like to give a balance of different types of writing. And then if you really have um, a preference for one, then when those projects come in, they generally go to that team member. But
Nice.
um, I don't think it's necessarily, waiting a longer time um, because I've seen it early on, right? Just starting out. I
Right.
think it's getting the opportunity. And I like to give that opportunity. I wish, other companies could be like that, and there certainly are. I don't know them all offhand, but I know there are smaller and larger companies that do that. Um, so it's a lot of effort to get there, but it's certainly doable.
Well, I think that to leave it with, I think it's always doable. If that's what you want to do, go for it.
Right.
I think the advice that you just gave in terms of, do a little start with editing papers the way you did, because your English was, you know, your first language.
Right.
And that was not, you were the only one in the lab.
Hmm.
And what a service you did to the rest of your lab members by doing that for them, right? So they could be published and they could move on. It must have been so gratifying.
Yeah, it was a few projects here and there that I would just help out with that I think were, fun for me. And, it helped it helped them move on in their
Yeah,
career. And
which
and
is,
and move the science along even more importantly,
well,
actually,
even more importantly, and the rapid pace of which science is moving these days.
is
Very
amazing.
exciting times.
It's we're on the forefront of it. That's why I enjoy being, part of many different company's goals at one time. Every month we have 10 to 15 different clients that we're helping push forward their science and their publications or grants and protocols to help the patients in the end, right? So it's
Right.
very exciting.
Because just my experience, right, working with scientists and for over 30 years. And nobody wakes up and thinks, oh, I'm going to be a scientist because I'm going to make a lot of money.
Right.
Scientists are born, and the purpose is to solve what's ever in front of them in whichever way they can to impact the human condition.
Hmm.
Every, and I've spoken to that literally thousands of scientists, and that is the purpose. It's not for themselves, it's for others. And it's fascinating to me. And the creativity that you need to do that as well. It's like
Hmm.
jumping into the deep end of the pool all the time.
It definitely is, but
Good.
it's exciting.
It's such an exciting, it's just exciting time. And was there any sort of parting words, anything you'd like to say after
Um,
following our conversation? Anything that you wanted to add or not?
It's been a wonderful time speaking with you and sharing what I can and my experience, and hopefully it will help others. And if there's, any connection that I can help facilitate or chat with people, I'm happy to do that.
Well, I say this to all the guests who have offered that up. Say, be prepared.
Yeah.
Anyways, it has been an absolute, really an absolute delight. Such an interesting and different kind of career.
One I couldn't have anticipated, but I am thankful it took the trajectory it did, and I'm looking forward to seeing what continues for this adventure.
Oh, I know, because I think underneath your name, the word I would give you would be curiosity, 2 words, curiosity and learning.
Mhm.
And
That's
joyful, like you're just full of joy. It's just been a pleasure, Tamar.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. It's so nice to be part of this.